love to know how you, because we both work with imposter syndrome, but I would love to know how you define it and why do you think it impacts, I've seen statistics as high as 70% of people on a regular basis. Why do you think that is?
Well, first of all, I would say I define it as that feeling that I'm a fraud. It's that sense that I'm not actually as qualified to be here as other people think I am, and it's only a matter of time before people figure that out. And so I think having spent so much time thinking about and experiencing this and working with people through it, what I have fundamentally come to in terms of my thinking about it is that it's really just a very specific form of anxiety. It's really just a manifestation of our commitment to doing the best job that we can. And when we find ourselves in a new or challenging situation, we're so afraid of getting it wrong, and it shows up as imposter syndrome. And I say that as somebody who has had a lifelong anxiety disorder. So I'm prone to catastrophizing in all areas of my life. And so it's not surprising probably that I would have imposter syndrome as well. But the reason why I boil it down to that, as oversimplified as it may sound, is that we can use a lot of the same anxiety management skills and tools that have been out there for years to manage our imposter syndrome as well. We can think about it in context, but really what it is to me is it's a fight or flight response. When you find yourself faced with something that you've never experienced before, that you feel is so high stakes that your career depends on it, of course you're going to feel nervous about that. Of course you're going to feel anxious about it. And then that sort of triggers that inner critic that starts to tell you the story of you're not good enough. And I think of that inner critic as a misguided bodyguard.
And it doesn't have to be something huge either. It can be little baby actions, right, that you take. And just even looking at the past, like you've had accomplishments that you've already been successful at, and you just forget about them in that moment and think, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it. And then you just, stay stuck, right? So do you have a type of imposter syndrome that impacts you more than others?
I definitely lean towards perfectionism in different aspects of my life. I'm definitely a lot less perfectionistic than I used to be, just because of time, and I don't have as much time to be a perfectionist anymore. But I can hear that voice in my head that says that it's not good enough. And I see this in so many of the people that I work with. And I think that one of the things that I often say is, be honest with yourself about what your actual definition of success is. And more often than not, our definition of success is perfection. We allow no margin for error. There's no room for failure. And when you are a perfectionist in that way, what ends up happening is you curate your world in such a way to minimize the possibility of any quote unquote failure, that you make your world really small. And going back to what we were talking about, then you don't take those risks. Then you don't get the benefit of growing. And so that's one of the things that I have really conditioned myself to do, is to take the leap. The minute I get an email that says, hey, could you do this for us? Even if I've never done it before, but it's something I would like to do, I say yes first, because I know I'll figure it out once I've made the commitment, right? But if it's too long, then I'll talk myself out of it.
Same. I told myself after I published the book, I'm going to say yes to everything. And I should have qualified that. Everything that makes sense, right? Everything that I should do, right? Not just everything. But I think about the Shonda Rhimes book and, saying yes, and reading her story about how much she had been saying no and holding herself back and saying yes to things that scared her to death, that she was not really comfortable with, just transformed how she showed up as a director, as a parent, as a friend, as a mom. Like all of those things changed for her because of her just saying yes.
One of the things I think about too, and I think we've all been in situations like this before, where we think of an idea, we talk ourselves out of it, and then someone else shares it and gets the credit for it, right? There's nothing more frustrating than feeling like, oh, that was my idea and I didn't act quickly enough. And so for me, I almost have this reverse attitude of like, why not me, right? Someone's going to do this. Someone else, if I say no to this opportunity, someone else is going to get it. Are they any more qualified? Are they any more capable than I am? I may not know it today, but I'm resourceful enough to figure it out. So why not me?
So what do you tell leaders who maybe are suffering from imposter syndrome themselves and have people on their team who are struggling with that? What advice do you give them, or how do you coach them through dealing with that for themselves and their teams?
So when it comes to dealing with it themselves, I definitely think about a number of different ways of reframing some of the thoughts that get in the way. And so one of them is what we were talking about before, is to just see it as a natural fear reaction, to stop accepting that voice as truth and recognize it for what it is, and to use some of the already proven interventions to help us manage our anxiety and stay neutral when we get into fight or flight. But I also think that what's really important is, and you said this earlier, we don't pay attention to the good stuff. We are cruising through our lives, noticing every mistake, every failure, everything that we think we did wrong. We overanalyze, we overthink, and then it's always at the top of our list. And then everything we did well, we just breeze right past and never notice. So it's no surprise that when we get from point A to point B, we think, how did I get here? It's a complete, right? And so I'm a big believer in intentionally introducing practices that balance the equation, so to speak, right? So it's all well and good to have the self-awareness and humility to recognize that you're not perfect, but there is nothing shameful about owning what you do well, and to really take stock of that on a regular basis. So some of the things I recommend is to write down every day or two, what are you doing well? Keep an accomplishments journal. This is what I'm celebrating. This is what I'm proud of. These are the problems that I've solved. And I think of it like a gratitude journal. When you keep a gratitude journal, you train your brain to look for the positive. If you keep an accomplishments journal, you train your brain to think about yourself in more strengths-based ways. I also think it's a good habit to come out of, if you've prepared for a meeting or some kind of a big interaction that's meaningful to you, you're always going to come out of that meeting thinking, what went wrong? But to actively ask yourself, what went well? What am I going to do next time that I learned from this time, right? Like, not just focus on the negative. And I think that if we condition our brains to think that way, we'll have a more well-balanced view of ourselves, which will help to temper some of the imposter syndrome.